We are in the V6 Firebird right now, and in this video we're going to kind of be going over the plans for this car, because lately my attention's been largely focused on work and school, and when I'm not focused on those, it's been on my Trans Am. But my Trans Am has been relatively well behaved lately, and I've gotten a lot of those issues worked out, so I'd like to get my focus back on the track car here. I think I have a lot of stuff in the pipeline for next year, a lot of different events and stuff that I would like to try to get to with this car, because I only did 2 track days this summer due to personal family reasons and whatnot. But next year I'm hoping I have time to do a little more. But so yeah, I mean, the car right now is all stock engine, transmission stock, clutches stock, and original, I believe. The suspension's pretty done up. Running the Koni STRT shocks in the front and the Koni Sport shocks in the rear. Running Strano springs all around. Got the 1/2-inch lift kit in the back. UMI 35/2020. I misspoke. UMI 35mm sway bar in the front and a 2020. I apologize. And a 22mm sway bar in the back. It's kind of a tongue twister. But yeah, the engine is completely bone stock. The only thing I've done to it is change the oil and change the AC compressor. The car is currently running 17 by 9.5 wheels with General G-Max RS tires, which I think might have some flat spots in them at the moment. Feeling a slight vibration here. It's kind of odd. But my plans for the winter are I'd like to replace the intake gaskets, because I believe those are bad. So I'd like to replace those so I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'd like to do a clutch on this car, because this clutch is starting to get a little weak. In first gear, you notice it especially. So I'd like to do that. As far as brakes go, I'd like to do the CTSV brakes at some point, but I'm not in a big rush. I have the C5 Corvette front brakes on, and those seem to be doing fine for as fast as this car goes, which is not very fast. My fan controller switch has been pretty good. I've liked that. Got the 160 thermostat in there. It's keeping it nice and cool. Temp gauge has unfortunately stopped working. But yeah, I'd like to do a, while I'm doing the intake gaskets, I'd like to try to give this car some more power. How I'm going to do that, I'm not entirely sure yet. That's still up for debate. So that could be a cam swap. That could be a cam with ported heads. It could be attempting to modify an M90 supercharger to bolt onto this engine. I'm not really sure yet. I think the M90 supercharger route is definitely the best power per dollar ratio, but it's also quite involved in terms of what has to be modified and cut and welded, and there's wiring that has to be done. So it definitely gets expensive and time consuming, and I don't know how to weld, so that's kind of a big issue with that project. So I think a naturally aspirated setup is probably more likely at this time. And also, for how I use this car, which is primarily a road course car, the supercharger might not get me much power. It would give me a lot of torque, but in terms of overall peak power, I think it runs the risk of getting so heat soaked that it might not do me that much good. So I think a naturally aspirated setup is probably more in line with what I'm looking for. And most of my complaints with the lack of power that this car makes are with the top end of the lines. Due to financial reasons, I'll probably just do a basic cam swap with no ported heads. Small, given the dollar amount that I would have to spend to actually improve it, right? So I don't think I'm going to mess with the suspension that much more at this time. Same thing with the brakes. I think the brakes work pretty good as is. I don't have any like super big like dying need to get better brakes at this moment. Primarily because this car just doesn't generate a ton of speed. It carries momentum pretty well, but it just doesn't get that fast on the straights. But we'll see. We'll see how it does, if I can get some more power out of it. I mean, I'd like to put this car on a dyno as it is right now. I'm currently in contact with a few local dyno shops to see if I can get this car in sometime soon to do you know, some baseline dyno runs. So we'll see. We'll see if that works out or not. But I'd like to get a baseline dyno so I can kind of get a rough power figure of what this car's making to begin with. And if I can pick up, I mean, 30 or 40 horsepower on top of that, I think I'd be a pretty happy camper, especially if it would be power in the upper rev range. I think that would be quite nice. But yeah, I mean, the handling of this car, it's quite impressive at the moment. My Trans Am currently has the exact same setup, minus the sway bars. That car's just on stock sway bars. But this car, for some reason, just feels way better. And I'm trying to figure out why. I think it might just come down to the tires. I think this car's got better tires on it. It also has 40 series sidewall on them. So this car's got a little more meat, a little more cushion to the ride, which I greatly enjoy. And then the sway bars, I mean, it's really the biggest differences. So, because this car, for whatever reason, it just handles and rides like much nicer than my Trans Am does. It's kind of irritating. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basic update. This car has been in storage since June, so it hasn't really gotten driven very much. In July, I did do a baseline quarter-mile run, which was actually quite sad. It put down a 16-second, almost a 16-second flat quarter mile, which is quite pathetic. When I first put that time down, I was like, holy cow, this thing's awfully slow. But then I looked up other people's stock V6 Firebirds and Camaros, and it seems that like 15.4, 15.5 is kind of what they do stock. And since mine's slipping the clutch so bad in first, my 60-foot time was absolutely terrible. I forget what it was exactly, but I can put it at the end of this video. But yeah, this car was just not it's not generating a lot of straight line speed. I think the slipping clutch has a lot to do with that. Now, like how we're driving right now, we're just doing, you know, low load driving, and the clutch is fine. I mean, it feels very soft. It doesn't have a ton of grab to it. But if you really start trying to put torque on it like you do in first gear, it does slip. So I have that to look forward to, replacing that. But once I do the clutch, the intake gaskets, potentially a cam swap, maybe some exhaust work. I've actually had headers in my basement for this car for 2 or 3 years now, and I've never gotten around to putting them on. I don't think those would gain a ton of power. They were just cheap eBay shorty headers, so I don't think that's really going to pick up anything spectacular, but maybe they'll gain good. The sway bars, I think, are a great upgrade, with pretty much no downsides. But yeah, I mean, the thing just needs more power. So like, this is full throttle. So like, it's not terrible, but that was second gear. On the track, I'm usually in third, and in third gear, it loses all its momentum, all its breath. It just, once you hit about 80 miles an hour especially, it just falls on its face. So I'm not trying to make this car, you know, pull like my LS1 does, but it needs to pull better than this. This is pretty slow. So I'd like to address that if I could, hopefully without spending too much money. But we'll see. A cam swap, I think, would cost me in the realm of about $1,000. So if I can get 30 or 40 horsepower for $1,000, that's not too bad. Ported heads, I think, would gain power, you know, maybe another 20 or 30 on top of that. But the price, you know, it goes up and up. I think ported heads can cost quite a bit of coin. So I don't know if I'm going to have the budget for that. But we'll see. Time will tell. But yeah, I mean, this thing is driving quite nicely. But I do intend on keeping the car a T5, the original T5 transmission. It shifts nicely, smoothly, doesn't really give me any trouble. So a T56 would have better ratios, but I don't think it's worth the hassle for me at this time, because the T56 swap is quite a bit of work, and it's quite expensive. So I can't really justify that cost when my T5 works quite nicely. Now if my T5 ever blew up or whatever, then yeah, okay, I might look into my T56 a little more in depth, but it would be quite a costly swap. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the plan, is to put my Trans Am in storage for the winter, and then kind of dig into this car a little bit. Hopefully get it out to some cool track events next year. Hopefully with a little more power, because I think that's really holding this car back, is the lack of power. I think if this car had, if I could get like 40 to 50 horsepower out of this thing, I think it would be a whole different animal. But I think about 30, maybe 40 on the high end is about the best I'm going to be able to get for a reasonable cost. But yeah, I mean, the last track day I did was June, sometime early June, at Waterford Hills, and the car was starting to get faster and faster, you know, just with how I was getting comfortable with it, and it started putting down pretty decent lap times. So if the car would just pull a little harder on the straightaways, I think it can cut quite a bit of time off. And then, you know, obviously as I get more experienced and more comfortable pushing the car, get faster and faster. But yeah, that's the V6. I haven't really messed with it much since June. I did that track day, and then the next weekend I put it in storage, and I haven't touched it since, besides driving it home. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad car, but those intake gaskets definitely got to happen. And if I'm digging that far into it, because the intake gaskets on a 3800, it's not like a humongous job, but to do it on a rear-wheel drive car with the F-body intake, it's quite a pain. So I was thinking, if I have to do that much work anyway to replace those gaskets, like why not make it worthwhile and, you know, do a cam while I'm in there. So we'll see. But yeah, car is a little slow, just a little bit, but she's good. She's a good girl. Yeah, handling is just fantastic. questions. I always try to answer them the best I can.